jumping on the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're into.
Cool. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Michelle Grace Hunder and I am a music photographer. Works out of Melbourne. I've got a studio in Footscray and I've been working for about 15 years in this industry. So I feel very fortunate to be able to do what I love, work with really amazing artists, and yeah, it's just been a really fulfilling career journey, I guess.
So what brought you into photography as a career?
It's actually very random. So I didn't pick up a camera until I was 31. So I was actually quite old and I guess relatively speaking, not that I would call myself old, but my husband bought me a camera for Christmas when I was 31. And he said, look, I've noticed that you like documenting things and especially at parties. So we'd go to parties. I'd love to take photos and then put them up on Facebook. So we had that documentation of the party that we went to and stuff. And I'm just like, I didn't even really think about it. I just really loved documenting things. So when he bought me the camera, I just threw myself into it. It was very strange. I hadn't had any experience with photography before that, other than in high school, and I really sucked at it back then. But I just fell in love with it, and I felt really, really drawn to the art form, and it came at a time in my life where another business had failed and I didn't really know what I was going to be doing with my life. And I just literally threw myself headfirst into this and started taking photos of kind of anyone that would be in front of my camera. So it sort of started with friends and family and a few musicians and rappers that I knew. And then friends were asking me to shoot weddings, and like it just evolved really quickly. And like within 6 months, I went professional. So it was a very crazy, like, quick journey into sort of doing it full time. And yeah, I've been doing it ever since, which is crazy.
And you've listed an amazing achievement here. You won an ARIA Award for Best Cover Art. Tell us a little bit about that experience and how that actually occurred, because I'm assuming that's quite rare for someone in Australia to win something like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, like the ARIAs, they do a best cover art every year, and it has definitely been a goal of mine because I work predominantly in the music industry now, and I've done lots and lots of covers, album covers and single covers for people. And yeah, I was nominated last year for album cover for Forest Claudette. Everything Was Green. This is actually the back cover behind me that I should tilt it up a little bit. I've got the front and back cover on a thing behind me. So yeah, so it was a collaboration with a long-term creative director that I work with, Jeremy Grey Ghost, who's just incredible. And I do a lot of work with him specifically on the Rule stuff, the Rule project. And yeah, we also came together to work with Forest Claudette on his release. And yeah, we got nominated, which was really cool. And like, you just never know with these things, like, you know, like it's voted by people within the ARIA community that can kind of vote. So I was really excited to win it. It was like definitely a career highlight, definitely a big honor. So yeah.
Amazing. So talk to me about what's going on now. So you're in a studio that you obviously run. So I'd like to touch on how
that's why it's so noisy in the background, by the way. There's lots of people here and my dog's here.
You have a lot of irons in the fire. You know, you run a photography masterclass and you've made a book. Tell us a bit about all these other, I guess, ventures you've...
Yeah, I do have lots of things going on. I think I like being really busy, and it keeps me interested and not bored, I guess. So I've always been like that. There's always been lots of things on the go. So the studio, my husband and I decided to open last year. So I was in another kind of shared space previous to that for about 12 years. And I just sort of outgrew it, really. It was like sort of done everything I could do in that particular space. And then my husband and I were talking about sort of combining forces, and he's a filmmaker and does documentaries, and we're like, why don't we sort of start a production company together and, you know, set up a space where we can work out of, but also that we can hire out to other creatives as well, which I love. Like, I love having this space that people can come in and use when I'm not using it. And it's sort of an extension of my course and masterclass and mentoring as well. So there's people that I meet through that process that I can then help in, get their skills up in kind of studio spaces and stuff as well. So it all sort of ties in, I guess. But the masterclass came about during COVID when I just didn't really have much to do other than write an online course. So I wrote a course that was aimed at music photographers and learning sort of the ropes of music photography, because like no one really teaches you the pathway essentially. So I just wanted to teach sort of like, how do you get entry? How do you like who do you need to speak to get entry to a venue? Like, who do you contact? What's the process? What do you wear? Like, what's the delivery process? And then it sort of goes into more advanced things about working with artists and doing press shots and stuff like that, and stuff like copyright. And it touches on, a lot of the things that you would have to do to know if you're a music photographer.
So you touched on, I guess, the skill sets required to take a good music photograph and cover art. What goes into the strategy in terms of communication, lighting, the style? How do you sort of end up at that final result for a client? What goes into that process?
Yeah, it really varies, to be honest. Like sometimes they'll come to me with a really firm concept, and usually what I like with my clients is to have some type of mood board as like at least a start, even if they're not like super firm on what the concept will be. Just some type of mood board to say, like, this is where we're sort of going to start. And then sort of what happens on the day, like we can get very close to that sometimes, or sometimes it'll be like, we'll just play at the end of the session and that's where the magic is. So it really varies. Sometimes it's like, we really, really just execute on exactly what they want. And then other times it's like, there's something really special that came from the end of the session or something that might end up on the cover. But the process can really vary from like the artist providing that stuff. Sometimes there's a creative director involved, sometimes not. Sometimes it's just us sort of spitballing ideas to see what can happen. Sometimes they'll just show me something and that I'll sort of build from. So it really, really varies, which I think I love. I love that in every instance it's a collaboration. It's not just me saying, it's definitely not just me saying anything. It's always trying to bring the vision of what they want the music to sound like to life. And that can come, depending on the person, it can come through different ways. But if it's not, like some people don't have really solid visual idea. And so you have to sort of tease it out or try different things. And then once they see it, they'll be like, yes, that's really cool. But then there's other people that are like, I know exactly what I want. And they sort of just want you to execute. So yeah, different ways. And I like I'm not fussed either way. Like I'm happy to work. Yeah, either if it's that or if it's with the creative director, or regardless, I just love working with people and I love getting to the point where they're just really happy with the final product.
So how did you, I guess, dive into this niche of music? Is it just starting out with who you knew? Like what was there any decision around that, or it just organically?
No decision. Very, very, very organic. I just happened to know really just one person I knew, Briggs, who was a rapper from my hometown in Shepparton. And I just started following him around with a camera and then started to get to know other rappers. And that was really the first sort of, 5 years of my career was just documenting hip hop and other rappers sort of within Melbourne and then outside of Melbourne. When I did my book in 2014, that was basically profiling rappers all across Australia. So it was very much just like I fell into it and I fell in love with, documenting musicians specifically. I felt a real affinity to music. I used to be a musician as a kid. I felt like I just got along with artists and musicians really well. Like I just sort of intrinsically know them as people and how they tick. And it all felt very, very natural and very organic and never felt forced. And it just sort of went from there, really.
How do you portray their personality when it comes to a photo? Like what sort of determines your decisions around like whether it's costumes, lighting or background elements? Like how does that all come about?
It's all vibes, to be honest. Like it sounds probably very like airy-fairy, but it'll just be one or two visual. Like I always need some type of visual cue to start and then it'll get my brain ticking. And a lot of it is yeah, it's just vibes. Like I can't really explain. Like I'm not a technical person at all. But the vibe of what something like it just be a little idea or and then I'll sort of follow that to be like, oh, I think we could do this. And then it's just a bit of like playing around really and seeing what we can kind of get from there. But I love playing with color. You probably see through my work, it's quite, especially at the moment, very vibrant and colorful. I've gone through phases of lots of black and white work and lots of sort of like one light studio setups, lots of strobe work, lots of long exposure work. And now I've really moved into like this constant light color. I'm just sort of always evolving. I get bored with something and then I move on to something else. So usually what it's like a little bit of an idea here and then ties into something that I'm sort of playing around with the moment and then off we go.
How do you go using constant light in your work? Are these like super bright film,
Not really. I just pump my ISO. That's what I'm just like, I'm shooting it really high because I'm a live music photographer, right? Yeah. So I'm not scared of having high ISOs anyway. So the lights aren't super bright. I'm just like, and also just with post work now and Lightroom and AI and all this stuff that you can, like, if you're really concerned about stuff being too grainy, you can really get rid of that. It's not really something I've ever really worried about. I kind of lean into that with my post processing anyway. And I love the control. Like you can see exactly the effect immediately. And then if I want to add in something, I can add in something else. And it's sort of like this beautiful puzzle that sort of happens right in front of you. So that's sort of the space that I'm in at the moment. And I love also, if you are working with constant light, then you can work with video at the same time. And I'm doing lots of collaborative work doing that. So it's like you don't have to do two setups. It just makes it really easy. It's easy to do things like reels and show BTS videos of setups. And so at the moment, I'm just really vibing on that. But I know that'll probably change in a few months and I'll go back to using strobes. So like I'm never really set in one way. It's just like right now, this is kind of something that I'm really feeling. So yeah.
Coming from a video background, I love constant lighting, but I feel like strobe lighting is a dark art that no one understands how it works. It's just, you don't see what you're going to get until you click a button. It's ridiculous.
And there's so much testing involved, which I went through a whole phase of just loving strobes and really playing with it and playing around with long exposure and strobes and color and strobes and all this stuff that you could do. And then, I just went into this like constant light world, which I'm really liking. And I think like lights and lighting are really evolving as well. So what is possible is constantly changing anyway, and they are getting more powerful and all of those things as well. So, it's just an ever evolving thing for me, just finding something else that interests and excites me. And that's sort of like the path that I'll go down, and that you'll really see it come out in my work, even though like I think every shot is really individual to the artist that I'm working with, because I do get really strong references from them, but I still think you can sort of see like a thread. Like I just did this reel that was like the 75 faces that I've shot since the studio opened like 18 months ago. And I was like looking, I'm like, oh yeah, you can really see my style when you watch that reel, I guess.
What do you think makes a photo your photo in terms of your style? Like, what are you seeing in that photo that's like, oh, that's me, that's my signature?
I definitely think that at the moment, especially, is like this color pop, like this real vibrant color pop. But I think there's a connection with the artist. Like, I do feel like my biggest skill outside everything is just making people feel really comfortable. So I feel like you can see that in the photo. Outside anything technical or any type of personal style, it's just like the person feels like, they're comfortable in that environment and they're not dreading having their photo taken, which is often how they come into the shoot. It's often they're like, I hate having my photo taken, be easy on me and all that sort of thing. And then we ease them into that. So
what sort of communication strategies do you use to get someone in that comfortable, I guess, space to get their photograph or portrait? Like, what sort of tools do you use for that?
That's such a good question. I don't even actually really know.
You apply them with alcohol, or do you?
Definitely not. So I think immediately it's like as soon as they come into the studio, it's like setting the mood and the tone. So often people come here, it's so funny, like it's happened so often in the last 18 months since we opened this studio, but people walk in and they're like, wow, they're like, do you live here? For some reason they think we live at the studio, which we don't, but I guess we've created an environment that feels sort of like homely. Like you walk into so it's a 3-level studio, and you walk into the bottom level where hair and makeup and stuff is done, and there's a couch there, and there's a table there, and there's a makeup area there, and there's lots of plants, and it's green, and so just making a comfortable environment I think definitely helps. There's great music always, so they just immediately walk into a relaxed environment. The second thing is I always want to run through what we're doing, so just so that they know, okay, this is what we're doing today. Let's have a look at your clothes. Let's pull out what we're going to shoot. Let's make a plan. And then just chatting and just how's your day? What have you been doing? And just getting them really relaxed and explaining to them that we'll make the process as quick and easy as possible. That's one thing that's really important with musicians, is actually making it quick. They don't want to be there all day taking photos. I would say majority of people don't love the process, so making it nice and quick and as quick as possible. So, if it's a 2-hour shoot, usually I can do 4 looks, 3 at least, but sometimes 4 in 2 hours. So it's really quick turnaround. Once I know that we've got what we need, we move on. It's we're not just shooting for the sake of shooting. Yeah. It's you want to get in and out, but get really solid, varied, usable content for their rollout.
And do you have a bit of a pose sheet or something similar for before they even walk in the venue? So you've got we're getting these poses today, or is that all come up with once you meet and have a chat?
It's pretty organic. Yeah, the pose stuff, I don't really over pose people, to be honest. There's a couple of tricks that I do. Usually I put music on upstairs in the studio as well. For me, it's more about movement rather than posing. So it's often sort of in between shots that are the magic, rather than someone striking a pose. So it's just I just get them to do lots of movement, and I shoot a lot. So it's just getting that real magic moment often is sort of what you're going for. And then they're not really thinking about it as well. I'll just get them, especially if they're not good in front of the camera, it's just just make really little small movements, even if you're just slightly sort of moving or dancing to the music, and that's where you get them not thinking about that they're at a photo shoot, but they're just sort of moving really organically, and you just get really natural movements that way, I think. I
guess the constant lighting also helps with that, because you don't have the flashing in your face all the time.
Totally, that definitely helps. The only thing with constant light and not using strobes is that I shoot just a stupid amount of photos, and it's just but if I was using strobe, you'd really have to slow down. And then if I'm shooting film, it's you even slow down even more. So there's definitely advantages to shooting different ways and not overshooting. When I'm shooting constant light, I always overshoot. But, you always get to the desired result that way. So it's looking for that magic moment in there where you really get that connection. You actually see when they just start to relax. You see it in their eyes, you see it in their body language, and that's where you get the magic. So I'm always sort of there's a lot of shooting before you get to that point, and then it's okay, we're in the zone, let's go. And lots of positive affirmations when we're getting excited, and I always tether to show them, exactly what we're shooting. I used to be really anti showing people, and now I'm the opposite. I'm big screen, let's see it, let's lean into it, let's if you're not liking it, okay, what are you not liking about it, let's tweak. And that just that positive affirmation and feedback, immediate feedback, I think really works.
Yeah, very cool. You mentioned a couple of times about the use of technology and how that's evolving for you. How do you see the next few years of photography panning out in terms of technology and what you're going to choose to use, what you're going to choose not to use? Do you see a big change in that space?
I think everyone's feeling the big change at the moment. Like my husband and I often joke about like, because AI is just moving so fast at the moment. We're like, what's our exit strategy? Because do we have a job in 5 years? But we're only joking. But I think I'm very much about sort of like evolve or get left behind. Even now, I'm 45. I'll be 46 next year, and I can't keep up with everything. So, I like to get young people around me. And if I'm not, able to keep up with everything, then make sure I've got a team of people that can help me with stuff, that understand, how to use stuff or whatever. I try and keep it on top of as much as possible, but for some, like if you're working, it's just like not possible to keep up on everything. So, but I see a huge, huge shift. And I am, like I said, I'm a big believer of just evolving with it and not resisting too much, and just using it to benefit your art and your processes, and so that you've got more time to be creative, essentially. So I've definitely looked into things like, the AI that you can use for post-processing, for example. I'm not using it at the moment, but I have looked into it. I was going to use it for one tour that I was on, and then it just wasn't quick enough at that point. Like it wasn't quicker than me at that point, which, that's going to change, I'm sure, very soon. So, but, constantly looking into stuff, what's possible, what will make my, process shorter so I can be doing other stuff. But there's nothing like, like cameras, obviously constantly evolving. The camera that I'm using at the moment, the Nikon Z8, is just like the autofocus on that is just out of this world. Like it feels like I'm cheating. I just can't believe how far cameras have come in the last sort of 15 years. And I'm like, how do they get better than this? Like it's not possible. And then they get better. So, I find that stuff really interesting and inspiring. And I try not to let it scare me too much. I know there's a lot of people that are like really frightened by it, but I think there'll always be a place for photography, for videography. It's just, obviously there will be a lot of places that probably do go to AI and stuff like that, but just trying to keep on top of it as much as possible and lean into it as much as possible rather than being resistant is sort of how I look at it.
Do you feel that AI is going to be able to capture some of the emotion that obviously you've built your whole business on? Do you think it's ever going to get to that stage?
Probably yes. It's hard. It's hard to really know exactly where it's going to go, but I think just seeing the improvement in the last year or whatever, you're just like, whoa, like, and I always say this is the worst it's ever going to be at this point. Like, you know what I mean? It's going to get better and better and better. But you're right, that emotion and connection that you get with the person, that's the stuff that's, really hard to fake. Like you can fake backgrounds, you can fake costumes and stuff, but can you fake the emotion or the connection that you get with someone? That's, I guess, where that's the stuff I think maybe will be last to go. So maybe I'll be okay. Maybe I'll be safe for the next few years.
And if not, you've got all these other irons in the fire, right? Like you've got your studio, you've got a course, you've got a book.
There's always I'm always evolving onto, like, I'm constantly thinking about this stuff. Like it's like, my husband and I talk about this all the time. Like it's not something that I'm just sitting on my hands waiting for it to steamroll.
And you've got a couple things here. Like apparently you love mentoring people, especially young women. Tell us a bit about that as well. Like if you can't fit anything else in your life, like what else have you got going on?
It kind of ties into the course stuff. And like often people will do my course and then want more training or more one-on-one sort of mentoring. So, and I think, I've been specifically really passionate about mentoring young women just because, when I first started shooting, especially in live music, there were just hardly any women. Like you just didn't really see many women around. And I just wanted to be sort of like a voice for change in that, and to be, help there be more women in the industry. So if, I can mentor people, then that would help in that space, if that makes sense.
Do you mentor across business as well? Like I know you've got some unique, I guess, paths that you've taken into, and you've obviously got a unique work ethic as well with everything everything happening all at once. Like, how do you go mentoring others around some of these work decisions, and I guess what sets them apart?
Yeah, that's such a great point. Yeah, often like a lot of the focus is around sort of work ethic stuff, because I do think that is actually what makes the difference. Like that is what really sets people, is doing the work. So it's often trying to set little goals that, shooting this many, if I don't see someone for a month, it's like, all right, let's try and say, can you shoot at least this many live shows at this many portraits? Like really setting them tasks to get stuff done. Because I think doing the work is sort of like the most important thing. It's like the other stuff will come when you sort of put your head down and really focus. The technical stuff will come, relationships will come, all that stuff will come if you just sit and really focus on doing as much work as you can do. It's like that 10,000 hours thing is just like such a goal, I guess. It's like you want to be as good as you possibly can at these skills, so you want to just be doing stuff to get really, really good at stuff.
How many team members have you got in the organisation?
It's usually just me and my husband, but because we're hiring out the studio today, there's people in. So it's actually a girl that I have mentored for a while. She's using the space. So it depends on the day. Sometimes there's just the two of us, and then sometimes there's like 20 people in here doing a shoot. So yeah, sorry for the noise.
That's okay. It's all good. Do you feel like all of this is sort of coming together from a larger strategy that you had, or do you think you're sort of piecing it all together as you're going along?
Oh, there's no strategy really. It's just like run and gun. I think if there's any strategy, it's always like, what's next? Do you know what I mean? Like it's always like looking for the next. Like I don't feel like, and I don't know whether this is a good or a bad thing, but I don't ever feel like content. Like I don't feel like it's enough. It's probably like, yeah, it's probably some psychological issue that I have, but it's like, it's funny because I'm very goal driven and always would have, these are my 10 goals for the next year or whatever. And then probably about a year ago, I'm like, I feel like I've ticked off all the goals like that I had. So I think that's what, getting the studio and having the production company with my husband and doing like there's always something else that I can be doing that helps me feel really fulfilled creatively and from a business perspective and from a goal perspective. So, but I've never had a big strategy like this is where I want to be in 5 years or 10 years. It's just like, it was always working towards little goals. I think that's why I'm really good at projects, because I'm really good at making a list, ticking off the list, moving forward. And I think that really helps in that regard. But I'm probably less good at big picture strategizing. I'm sort of very good at sort of execution and like short goal sort of stuff. So it's just on to the next little short thing. I'm trying to get better at strategy, but it's not one of my best skills, I would say.
Going back to your photography and choices around it, what makes a photo good in your eyes? Like what sort of ticks that box for you, being like, that's an amazing thing. I love this one. I love this art. Is it to do with the client feedback? Is it to do with the communication that's hidden or portrayed in the photo? What sort of decisions make something successful?
It's not client feedback, I would say. It's like, I often think that the photos that the clients pick are like not the best photos anyway. Like sometimes they're my least favorite photos, which is always bizarre. It's like, if they're happy, that's great. But what I would choose often is, it really comes down to vibe. It's I might not even be able to articulate exactly what it is, but there's just something about it. And I think once I've learned more about technical photography as I've gone and, started to learn about things like leading lines and rule of thirds and stuff like that, I'm sure the stuff that all my eyes are drawn to maybe fall into some of those more technical categories, but I don't even know if I could actually verbalize that. It's often just, it could be an expression. It could be, how light's sort of hitting something. It could be, there's just something that it's just like, that's great. But I don't know if I can always pinpoint it.
Do you feel like it's something you can repeat? Like you've got processes that you sort of run through that end up in the result that you want? Sort of like you always resort back to that step 1, 2, 3, it works out kind of situation.
Yeah, I think the process is really fall back on just the 10,000 hours thing. It's just like, so if something's not working, I'll always have something to fall back on because I've just done this for so long. So it's like, okay, this isn't working, let's just move on. Let's try something else. And, you know, if you try enough things, there's something that's really gonna, you see it straight away. Like every shoot, you're like, yeah, that setup was just magic. Like you see it, the client, everyone sees it. It's like, that's where the real magic is. You probably can't predict it ahead of the time. Because sometimes the stuff you're like, oh, I think this is going to be the best. And then you're like, oh, actually, that other setup was, we weren't even planning on doing that. And that one ends up being the best one. So it's very funny how it can work out on the day. But again, it's like, I'm a very intuitive shooter. So it's all about vibe and feeling and stuff on the day. Again, it sounds very airy-fairy, but it's just like when it works, it sort of works and everyone knows you're in the zone. But the particular shots often, I'm often surprised what clients pick, or I'm like, okay. And then sometimes everyone aligns and it's just like, sometimes there's just standouts that, everyone agrees on, which is always really cool.
You mentioned before about some clients obviously asking for video at the same time, right? Like, oh, can we capture some video at the same time? And obviously your husband does video as well. Is there any battling in terms of who gets the limelight in terms of, you know, I need these 10 minutes, you need these 10 minutes? Do you have like a bit of a process where you share time with a client in that space, or is it more organic than that?
So the stuff that I do, like music stuff, doesn't usually cross over with what I do with my husband. It's actually really separate. So I've got a team of sort of younger creatives that I work with on that video stuff. And that is it can vary. Sometimes it's like everyone gets their own scheduled time, or sometimes it's like we're going to have to sort of work really side by side. But when I'm working with my production company, with my husband, usually the stuff that if I'm doing stills, usually it's like very much I am the least important on the set. And if I get something great, that's great. I mean, often the stills we do on set are just sort of like, there will be BTS. Occasionally there'll be some type of hero shot that we'll need to use, whether it's for a publication or something. But I'm really good at just being able to step in, take a shot. It's 2 seconds and step out. I don't need a lot of time. But if I'm doing my music stuff where it's like it's probably leaning towards the stills being a bit more important, and then having some time to do some more sort of, it's usually social content, reels sort of stuff anyway, but we'll allow some time sort of at the end of each setup to get something.
I always find in that circumstance, something always suffers. You know, if someone says, oh, can you do, because obviously we're video, people go, oh, can you take a few stills at the same time? It's like, we could, but there's less time for video. So
And people don't understand that it is really a separate art form. Like, they're like, yeah, you can do it on your camera. It's like, yeah, you can, but like your brain's got to switch into a totally different art form, and they're really separate. So having a separate person to do it. And I've worked so often on, music videos and stuff like that, where I literally have like 2 seconds to get, and it's the single cover shot, but they'll give me 2 minutes in between setups or whatever. But so I'm comfortable in working in environments where you've got not much time and you've got to get the shot. So that's fine.
If you could give one piece of advice to your past self or someone starting out in the industry, what would it be?
Someone starting out, it's always just do the work. Like, I can't stress that enough. Like, you really have to work hard. There's nobody, especially in the music industry, there's no photographers that I know that are successful in this industry that just haven't really put in the hard yards. Like, just done years and years of grinding, and it's not just 1 or 2 shoots here and there. It's like, it's shooting constantly and just being out there, being visible, being present, being part of a community. That's sort of how, you get your work out there. And if it was, the advice to my past self was probably don't go so hard. I mean, I really burned myself out early on, often just collapsing in fatigue and stuff like that. I remember a mentor of mine where I was just like, it was such great advice. I still use this advice, actually. I was at this point where I was just so fatigued and just like burnt out. And he's like, it's time to put your rates up. He's like, every time you get to that point where you're so overloaded, just put your rates up. And I've done that now for 15 years. You just keep putting your rates up, and then you can have a little bit of breathing space. And then you're doing, you know, higher value work and less of it, but still making as much money and stuff. So I think that's such great advice. But at the start, it's like, you know, you really have to sort of be grinding and getting out there and being visible and doing as much sort of work as possible. It's like a lot of people don't want to hear that, but it's sort of the reality, really.
In terms of, I guess, one of the excuses you might hear in that space would be obviously finding people to photograph. How does someone find people to photograph? Like, what's that sort of step look like?
Totally. So for me, it was doing personal projects, and so my first personal project was what ended up being my book. But at the start, it was not that. It was just, in my head, logically, I was like, I need people to know who I am. So I need to work with people. So I'll start this project, which is just a portrait series on local rappers. And I just started shooting local rappers. And like, they were, you know, names that people probably won't know very well. And then they would introduce me to someone else, and then they would introduce me, and it just snowballed into this 2-year project where I end up shooting 200 rappers across Australia. And it goes from, you know, names that you probably haven't heard of to the biggest names in Australia. And then my second project, which was Her Sound, Her Story, which was a portrait series and a full-length feature film, was the same thing. We just started shooting women that we knew, and then we'd say, can you introduce us to this person? And then it just, you know, then it's like you get Missy Higgins, and then you get Julia Stone, and then you get Tina Arena. It just like snowballs into, but you don't start with those people. It's like you start with the people that are more entry level or beginning their career, and then you sort of progress through. And it's patience, and it's, you know, being a great person and being nice to deal with, and all those sort of things as well. But asking, especially if you're a music photographer, just asking like local bands. Everyone needs photos. Everyone's like, who's going to say no if you just approach someone and say, hey, I need to practice. Can I use your band to practice? Like, no one's going to say no to a free photo shoot if you're starting out. So I have no issues with people just getting out there and shooting to get to build a portfolio, you know.
Absolutely. Cool. All right. I think it went really well. I think you did extremely well.
Sorry about all the talks.
No.
Sorry about that.
It's totally fine. Thanks for listening to the Creative to Creative podcast. Tune in next time for some more inspiring discussions with leading creatives. And check us out on YouTube, where you can see shorts and bonus material from previous and upcoming guests. This podcast brought to you by Motion by Design.